The man says he is just an inhabitant of planet Earth, a civilized place. He spits blood and a child calls out to old man Seo, saying that her mother asked her to bring this for him. The old man thanks her. The child places the small bread roll on the floor and asks him to get better and make more of that soap. With that, the little girl leaves in the blizzard. And once again, he says, I am an inhabitant of planet Earth, someone who came from a civilized world 50 years ago. He doesn't know how, but he ended up in this weird world. He was on his way to a lecture with his co-workers when they were swept away by a landslide. It seemed obvious that everyone had died, but they woke up in this strange world. In front of a giant fox with 3 tails and a 2-headed snake. Strange people with the power to fly through the skies. That reminded him of some of the novels he read from time to time. However, even though he was aware of this, he never imagined that all of his colleagues would have a much better life than the one he led. Creatures known as the sages appeared from the skies and were impressed by the talents his friends had, and each of them was taken to different parts of the world and the heavens. In that place, only he and director Kim were left. For some reason, they both held out hope that since they had also come from another world, something special would eventually happen to them. However, as time began to pass, they realized, he and director Kim, that there was nothing special about them. All they could do was manual labor to survive. 6 months later, the director said he couldn't go on living that way. Putting together the little money they earned, he bought a basic martial arts book, the kind that's sold on any street. Strangely, however, in just 3 months, he mastered the book and became a martial arts master. He started to work for the nation and learned more and more advanced martial arts. Before long, he became a powerful warrior known throughout the world, while the protagonist was left behind. To this day, he still wonders, was there something special in store for him? He always believed so, but time passed and nothing happened. And now, after 50 years, he's just an old man who is going to die alone from a cold. He tried his best to survive. He learned the language of this place, how to write, how to earn money. He bought a small plot of land and built his own house. Using his knowledge from Earth, he made things like soap, for example, to sell and make money. This world was much less civilized, and he knew of some concepts that were new there. But the martial world here is competitive. His recipe was quickly stolen, and the guys with much more money invested in a much larger scale production, and he was sort of pushed out of the market. Only in other novels do you invent soap and become a billionaire. Since then, it hasn't been easy to make even enough money to get by. And now there he was, waiting for death after being rejected by this world. He wonders what they expected him to do. He tried his best. So what was the right path? Why was he chosen if he wasn't special? And why did he have to keep on living just to have everything taken from him? At that moment, he no longer even had the energy to keep his eyes open, while thinking that all he wanted was a little more power or perhaps opportunities. And just like that man, he died. However, we can't end everything here. There he is, waking up, looking at his own hand, wondering why he's alive and why he's wearing the same clothes he had on when he arrived from Earth. In front of him are all the people who work with him, nursing headaches, wondering where they are. And that's when it hit him. He had come to this world with the power, yes indeed, the power of regression. Right after that, one of the guys there, who I think is that Kim guy, comments that they were on a trip. So how did they end up there? Obviously, this is the very first day they arrived, right after the accident. Strangely, when they hit the ground, he saw a strange light and opened his eyes there. The problem is this was 50 years ago. It's hard for him to really remember how things worked. Someone is calling for manager Seo, and while our boy is there wondering what he should do now that he has regressed. In most regression stories, the person abuses their knowledge of the future. However, all he learned was how to make soap, and he doesn't even remember the past because he ended up living for too long. At this, the guy was calling for him shouts, calling for Seo Yoon Ryong, and tells him to look over and stop ignoring everyone. Our boy is about to apologize for not turning around, and the guy just punches him in the face out of nowhere. The girls there and the others just stand there with their mouths open, confused. The guy who called him said he's an idiot, that he must have fallen asleep while driving and made everyone fall into that hole. Apparently, the guy has no idea that they actually died, since he says almost everyone died. My friend, let me tell you a little secret. Seo Ryong, however, had forgotten. It had been a long time, since anyone had even called him manager. That's why he didn't realize this guy was referring to him. And the guy asks if manager Seo is trying to lose his job the moment they get back. The protagonist recognizes the guy as section chief Jun Myong-hoon, the son of a butterfly. A scumbag who only got the position because he's the son of some director or something like that. 32 years living in pure nepotism and a bastard who always made his life difficult. The guy is there chewing him out while everyone's asking him to calm down. Seo starts to get up, remembering that on the day he was driving, he really was a bit tired. That's because the bastard Jun had dumped all of his own work on our boy to handle. Not to mention he wasn't even supposed to be the one driving on this trip. The guys are screaming, everyone trying to calm him down, while Seo's memories are slowly returning. On that day, in the past, something similar happened. He thought he was in the wrong, and just kept apologizing, all hunched over. And that's how he went on living for the next 50 years, always apologizing, lowering his head. Even when bandits robbed him, he would apologize. When the martial artist humiliated him, he apologized. However, after years and years of a life like that, he began to realize something. It's necessary to control your behavior around people you can't handle. However, there are different situations. At this, he calls out to Chief John and says that he knows he's angry, but now wasn't the time to be pointing fingers at each other. That John guy comes over to throw another punch with a lovely comment about his mother. Whoa, and it landed square on his cheek. I thought our boy was going to defend himself. Ah, hold on, he's giving him that stare down, saying that he'll never have to kneel before someone he can actually handle, and he serves one right back to his cheek. Everyone stood with their mouths agape as he moved forward, saying that in his past life he had been beaten by countless martial artists, an uncountable number of times. He lands another direct hit and he remembers. The bandits were much more aggressive and he would get beaten up even for just gathering herbs on the mountain. The same thing would happen when he didn't pay his taxes. And now there he is, beating the hell out of the guy. In this violent world, he had managed to gain something that these people at this moment did not have. He knew exactly how the human mind worked. The moment you land a punch right in the eye, fear is amplified. After taking a few more, only 2 words instinctively leave the mouth. Right then, John, trembling all over, just utters the famous line, "I'm sorry." The protagonist might not have the mythical talents that those sages from the heavens seek, or the martial prowess necessary to become famous in this world. However, he did have the ability to change his destiny. That fool John is there with his hands on his head completely subdued, while the others call out to Seo and ask him to calm down a bit, How could he beat up his coworker like that? Our boy immediately plays the normal person card, saying that he accidentally lost his head and offers a sort of apology. Manager Kim says that there's no point in apologizing to them. That John guy might have crossed a line, but he went too far by pummeling the guy like that. Seo knows that of all the people there, the only one who will sort of stick with him is Director Kim, so he kind of agrees with the guy. This man is going to become one of the strongest martial artists as soon as he starts learning. Seogi has to support this guy and stay close to him. Obviously, this was all just his plan for now. He goes over to John and apologizes, saying that he really did overreact. John looks like he wants to say something, but one little glare from him and the guy turns away, crapping his pants. Kim takes a look at the forest there, and says they have to get out of this place and find a village or something of the sort. Seo knows that's the logical thing to do. However, it's a shame that logic doesn't work in this world. This was the world of immortals where everyone is trying to secure their own immortality, and the only rule that exists in this place is that the strong devour the weak. Anyone in this world with a sword in hand will fight for fame and honor. The name of this forest is the Path of Ascension. Unfortunately, there is no nation, village, or anything nearby. At this, he calls out to Kim and says that the sun will be setting soon, so maybe they should make a camp in a safe place. The man agrees, saying he's right, but wants to know, where's their car that was full of supplies? If they could find that, they could survive easily. Our boy already knows it's a shame, but that car will not be found under any circumstances. The problem is they won't believe him if he just says that. He can try to convince these guys that it's impossible to find the car. He has another plan. He says that the best idea for now is to split up. One team looks for the car while the other team sets up camp. That way they secure both opportunities. Since it's a logical decision, everyone ends up agreeing and night falls. Obviously, they didn't find it and they built a campfire. The blue-eyed girl, whose name I still don't know, wants to know where the car is. They were in a landslide. So where did the thing end up? Kim and everyone else comments that nobody has a clue. She's asking the wrong person. Everyone there is lost. The group is eating some kind of chestnuts, which are pretty tasty, and Seo says he found more on the way, so they don't need to worry. At this, the manager praises him, saying that the situation is very difficult, but thanks to him, things aren't getting too complicated. Ever since the company, he knew he was a person they could count on. And now he remembers that he was probably very tired since John had dumped all of his work on the boy. The other girl with the yellow eyes says that the manager has indeed always been very diligent. The little devils are all laying on the parades, right? It's a shame he already knows these wretches are all going to abandon him. In his past life, Seo only found this cave after hours and hours of walking in the dead of night. And now he says that it was by luck that he found this place, while thinking that he has to take advantage of this short moment because this is the last night they'll be able to laugh like this. A short time later, under the moonlight, he's trembling as he says he welcomes the Lord of the Forest. A three-tailed fox in front of him says that the boy has a very strange smell for a human, has lived for over 1,000 years and has never smelled anything like it. At this, the people who are waking up in the cave come outside and they all get a fright too. In his memory, Seo tells everyone to kneel and respect the Lord of the Forest. At this, the fox says that every time it meets a human, it remembers why they are idiotic and rude. It would have already torn off everyone's limbs, but it seems one of them knew how to respect the forest, and that's why they would be forgiven. However, with that said, they were in the territory of the Lord of the Forest and would have to pay the price, so one of them would have to offer an arm to stay there. Seo remembers in his past life, no one knew what to do when this creature appeared, and they started screaming in desperation. The fox then took all of everyone's limbs. Damn man, they were left half dead. At least this time, the fox seemed to be appreciating the way he acted. The creature, however, licking its lips, wants to know who's going to give an arm. Seo had already seen everyone lose all their limbs in his past life, so this wasn't such a big deal. A single arm from one person was a small price. Besides, those guys would arrive suddenly and heal everyone. That's how they survived. Not to mention, knowing that something like this could happen, he had even prepared an herb that helps reduce the pain. And at this, with sheer guts, he says he'll offer his arm. Everyone is startled, and the fox doesn't hesitate for a second. It just goes and takes a big bite, man, and pulls the boy's arm off. Everyone there feels the pain, and he immediately goes to get the herb. While he eats, the fox then says it thought the taste would be different because of the smell, but he was really identical to any other human. In fact, it was even worse because he seemed to have very impure veins. Siu, completely wrecked, apologizes for the offering not being good enough. But at this, the fox turns and says it would let them stay for 7 days in its territory, and no one there would die, thanks to its divinity in this forest. It leaps away and is gone. The rest of the group come calling for Siu, asking if he's okay. He says he is and asks for help to get to the cave. Since he was the first one to encounter the fox, he says he talked with it before they arrived and learned a little about this world. He reveals that they are no longer on Earth, and at this, everyone is scared, saying they never imagined something like this had happened. But considering they saw a 3-tailed fox, so reality is sinking in for the guys. And our boy explains, showing his arm, that at least they're safe for a week because of what he did. The others want to know, what happens after that week, and he says they'll have to give up something else. Everyone is desperate, but he just says he's exhausted and needs to rest and hopes everyone understands. Night falls, and apparently Jung said something because everyone is against him. The protagonist is listening to the guy asking who's going to give up an arm and a leg in a week. The guy in the Adidas tracksuit says that even so, they can't just give up on Siu like that. He was very useful and was the person who found the place, right? And he even gave up his arm. Jung says they should make the most of his presence, and then discard him. He's already lost an arm anyway and won't last long. For now, Jung is making his little plans, but our boy is over there without an arm and farming aura with his hand in his pocket. And from what he heard the guys talking about, it seems they want to imprison him to offer up one of his limbs every week. He picks up a big-ass rock, saying he wasn't too thrilled about that. However, with the violence he learned over the last 50 years, it would be easy to finish off Jung, even without an arm. The guy is there with his back turned, talking while he questions whether to kill him or not. He takes a deep breath, drops the rock, and says not for now. Fear must be influencing everyone's judgment at this moment, and if he's too cruel, it will only complicate the future relationships he needs to build with Director Kim. At this, he hears someone telling Jung to shut up or they'll break his legs. Sia realizes that even though Jung is full of plans, there were still people on his side. Night falls and another day arrives. Unlike the fox that ate an arm, the two-headed snake that appeared only asked for a little blood. This same snake in the past life sucked their blood, even though the poor souls had no limbs left, no feet, no arms. This time, that Chief Ogai offers his little arm for a suck, and the snake took a quick taste and left. That's because the human's blood this time was the worst it had ever tasted. It didn't want any more. Siu knows it didn't like it because that guy's blood is bathed in alcohol and nicotine, on top of the boy's cholesterol. At this, he tells John Mingyong to come with him to get some herbs. It's kind of disrespectful to have called the guy by his full name, but Siu just asks if he's hungry or not. The guy says yes, so he tells him to come on because he's going to show him which herbs are edible. He's already planning to give his arm to the fox next week too, so if he dies, he needs someone like him to know these things. John is all awkward there, right? This is exactly his plan, and he says it's good to know that and thanks him for sharing the information. However, Siu knows very well, man, the fox isn't coming back and this guy won't even have a chance to make use of this information. Next scene, he's chewing out the fool John, asking how many times he has to tell him not to pick the wrong herb. The guy's all like, I'm sorry. And our boy says it seems like he's trying to kill everyone. He keeps chewing the guy out, taking advantage of the passive aggression from his past life. John tries to explain that he needs a break. He's been digging for these herbs non-stop. However, Siu knows that this bastard did everything he could to punish him from the very first day he was at the company. And with that, he just tells him to get back to work, that they have to finish this before the sun sets. A while later, John manages to find a giant ginseng in his hand. He asks if this thing is really normal, and our boy says it seems so. Obviously, the guys have no idea that this is actually a yellow bamboo root. Maybe it's because they're in the Forest of Ascension that they are so full of energy. Normally, that thing grows to the size of a little finger. However, in a place like this, things are different. It's not very useful for those who depend on spiritual energy, but for those who rely on physical strength, it's perfect. Seeing that the harvest is going well, John gets excited and already wants to know how much more they'll find. A while later, looking at the horizon, Siu knew the time was coming. A bright explosion happened in the sky. John fell face first to the ground. Everyone is writhing with their hands on their heads. What's going on? Some guys appear in the sky, saying it's a surprise but found so many talented people. The one in the background in a yellow robe tells Byulko to disappear because they belong to him. The guys are all arguing there while Kim wants to know who they are, what's going on. The one in the black robe comments that only 3 of them had spiritual roots and the rest seemed like normal mortals. He extends his hand, making a golden ball, and throws an attack at Jun. The old man appears excited, saying that the boy really did have the power of the golden thunder. The one who looks like a woman with black lipstick, who I don't know if it's a he or a she, says it's his turn now and plays a little tune. Right then, the blue-eyed girl starts to writhe in agony, screaming desperately, while the other one celebrates, saying she found a perfect immoral route. The muscular guy puts his hand on the shoulder of that chief guy and says he has a sacred body. He'll be taken as a disciple of Asura. The guy is clearly kind of scared, not knowing how to respond while feeling the pressure from the man. But the one with the black lipstick says that maybe he'd be better off in the Valley of Ghosts, a perfect place to seek immortality and dominate the heavens. They all seem to be arguing over who gets to keep Chief O, while Kim is kind of confused by everything that's happening. Suddenly, the guy in the golden robe pulls out a small pot and sucks John inside, saying that humans are too indecisive and he will take him to the path of ascension regardless. The muscular man sees that our boy lost his arm to the fox and says that he really is very brave. He might just be a regular mortal, but he really was quite a boy. Siu thanks him, but at this, the guys are already leaving, saying their work there is done. They should take advantage of the fact that this forest would be safe for 10 years since they passed through. Kim, desperate, tries to say that they need help because they don't even know how to get out of this place, but the guys have already left. Siva knows in his past life, he shouted and shouted but was ignored like an insect, so it's not even worth it. At least just as everyone's bodies were restored in the past life, in this one he got his arm back. Kim, however, wants to know what they are going to do to survive in a forest like this. Strangely, a bunch of stars seems to be heading in a certain direction, and he wonders why. The next day, inside the cave, the girl is suffering, spitting blood. The other one there in the green clothes, I already realized that these girls must not be important because I still don't know their names. She comments that her friend there in the pink clothes is not doing well. What do we do? Siva just asks to wait a little longer. What if someone shows up to heal her, right? It would be a huge coincidence. The group finds it a bit strange, but right then, someone enters the cave and says that them suffering in this place were like ants trying to defeat a dragon. Kim asks who he is, and the man introduces himself as the Sea Dragon King Sihuil Nice Sing, first name as our Make Good Idea author. He comments something about controlling the storm and says he saw it was raining here, and that's why he came to this place. The girl lying on the ground somehow used some kind of magic to create this. He finds it strange because she looks like a normal woman, so how could she have so much power? Besides, she wasn't even consciously manipulating the weather, which was even stranger. Seo says that they are the ones who are confused. They arrived in this place not long ago, and powerful people like him keep showing up all the time, because it seems like they are taking his companions. The so-called Huil laughs and says that apparently some colleagues had already arrived there and seen potential in the group. It's almost ironic that now, conveniently, he has also appeared in front of this woman. He then asks if the mortal understands where he is. This was a place known as the Path of Ascension, the perfect passage point to the upper world, and in a few months, the Gate of Ascension would open there. It's something that happens once every 1,000 years. And because of that, countless creatures and people gather in this place to try to pass through this door. And that's why so many strange people are showing up in this place. Seo says he understands, while Kim wants to know why the rest of his colleagues were taken into these sect-like things. Will says that it's really difficult for a mortal like him to understand. For people in this world, it was common to possess magic to increase or decrease the size of things. And probably the guys who took his friends have their entire sect and group inside one of these objects. Their plan is to cross the gate carrying everyone. He himself inside this object as the Sea Dragon's castle stored away. There, more than 8,800 dragons were sleeping. Now, I don't know if he means dragons as in the creatures or dragon members, right? Because he says there that the girl is very peculiar. If she joined the group, she would have the chance to become something extraordinary. Kim asks him to wait, saying he can't just take the girl like that. But suddenly, he just falls to his knees and his eyes are almost popping out of his head. Will just says he will give his blood to her and accept her as part of the group. This was the best solution for everyone there. Furthermore, he will advise them to never get in the way of the intentions of the people in this world. Damn, the boy's head is about to explode and our poor protagonist got caught in the crossfire. Will leaves, saying he is being merciful. Most people would have killed him. With a big thunderclap, he flew off on the dragon, stylish as hell. The next day, everyone was kidnapped. Oh no, only this one is left. We still don't know her name, man. She's laughing like a maniac, saying, what a mess. This world with its dragon business, colleagues being taken away, people flying, what the hell is this? This would probably be my exact same reaction as Seo gently pats her, telling her to calm down. She, however, just begs for our boy not to be taken away too. She wouldn't be able to survive in this forest alone. However, he just thinks it's a shame, but their time is up. Suddenly, she begins to writhe in agony, puts her hands on her head, and says something is coming. Kim runs to help, but she says it's too late, and whatever it is has arrived. Out of nowhere, an old man on a mechanical Oni lion appears. Good heavens, man, that one came straight out of ChatGPT. And the old guy wants to know how there are mortals on this path. However, he comes to his own conclusion, saying that the place is unstable because of the opening of the gate. That must be how they ended up here. Now he wants to know from the mortals who emitted that vast consciousness. He felt a strong presence, as if it were one of the sages from the upper realms descending to Earth. And for some reason, he believes it's the girl. The old guy asks the other man to stay there. wanting to know who he is and warns him that she is their colleague. However, the old man just gives him one look and once again Director Kim is attacked. Oh, the poor guy, man. Every person who shows up beats him up, my boy. It's a good thing our boy cushioned the blow so the guy wouldn't die, but geez, his ribs got torn up and the not all peculiar old man went over, took the girl's face in his hands, and said the child will be taken with him. She might not have a good foundation, but with the talent she possessed for consciousness, he can awaken her power. She's crying, calling out for the two of them, but the guy says it's best for her to abandon these connections with the world, especially now that he has already made this offer. At this, the two are flying, and apparently he's going to kill them to force her to accept. She, however, says she accepts if he doesn't kill them. Better that way. The old man says it's good for her to forget all the connections she has with the world, and she says that's fine. He lets the two of them go, but then suddenly aims in their direction, saying that if he leaves them alive, she will remain connected forever. Ah, phew. He opened a portal there for them to return to a nearby city. Humble, right? The other guys who came didn't even do that much for the boys. Well, it's true they didn't have much of a choice either, because in reality, they were just sucked into that thing. And through the strange old man's little ring, they could only hear the girl calling for them. But goodbye. The two of them wake up in the middle of an abandoned place, hearing people selling scriptures, selling cloth in a place called Yangak. See opens his eyes there in the alley, wondering where exactly he is. In his past life, he didn't fall into this place, so unfortunately, he doesn't know it. Apparently, that old man told the truth. He threw them into a random place. However, for some reason, he still felt as if it were a little familiar. Shielding his eyes from the sun, he finally recognizes the place where he had once lived for a while. The famous capital of Wanga, the city of Sukyam. From what I've understood so far, our boy has no powers at all, except for the fact that he can regress. So it's the competition of the talented against the boy who goes back in time. A short time later, they're still in the alley talking, and the old guy says he can't take it anymore, he's going crazy. Sue comments that he feels the same way and wish he could wake up as if it were all a dream. The poor old guy scratches his little hair and says that now they're screwed, only the two of them are left. At least maybe they should be relieved, right? That they weren't taken by those monsters. Stu, however, doesn't think the same way. He may have gone back to the past, but he remembers that following this path, he was nothing more than an herb collector who got beaten up every day. He then says that whatever the future holds, they can't just stand still in this alley forever, so at least they have to get out of there. The city is vast, but Kim doesn't understand anything these guys are saying. It seems like everyone is commenting about them, since they're kind of being stared at, but he has no idea what about. At this, Siu says they're commenting that the clothes they're wearing are funny. Everyone around is speaking Chinese, but the two of them are Korean. So the guy is a bit confused, but Siu says he learned Chinese when he was younger. The old man, however, seeing the boy's torn up back, is more worried about that than the fact that he speaks two languages. And the bastard lied, it's not even Chinese they're speaking. The symbols are kind of similar, but the sounds are completely different. In his past life, he spent 2 months being chewed out by beggars just to start understanding what these guys were saying. However, now there's no reason to worry about that. He says that first it's time to get new clothes, but the guy is already unsure. How are they going to manage if they have no money and can't even communicate properly? However, the clever devil went to an herb shop and threw that fat ginseng into the old man's hand, who was shocked. He immediately let him know that this yellow bamboo root was over 800 years old, so he better pay a good price for it. The old guy immediately offers 15 silver ingots, that's some serious bars, and seems like a hell of a lot. Even Siu is surprised. It seems that in his past life he never managed to accumulate so much money. I thought he was going to try to negotiate to show he knows the values, right? But the bastard was a really broke beggar man. He just accepts. A short time later, they're already in a big-ass house that our boy seems to have rented or bought, and he already tells Mr. Kim that he's going to teach him the language of this place. It seems everything worked out well and quite easily. However, that right there is the power of money. The problem is that to get this house, plus fake identities for both of them and clothes, he spent almost everything. He's left with one little silver ingot, and the director can't help but notice that the boy's back is still bloody. Good heavens, go take care of that. It's going to get infected, and you'll have to reincarnate again. At this, Kim says he's going to stop calling our boy manager, and that from now on, he'll be Su Yun. A little later, he explains that the reason they got all this money was because of those herbs. The problem is, they're going to run out of money when the herbs run out. So the first and most important thing is to find a way to earn money consistently. Mr. Kim already thinks they can sell the rest, save up some money, and start a business. Siu knows that this guy used to manage a relatively large company, so it's not a bad strategy. It'll allow them to live. But just living is no longer enough for him. He went back in time, and in this life, he's going to dream big. He knows that besides that, Mr. Kim is a martial genius. By reading some cheap, random street books, he managed to become a master in a few months. A short time later, he got some more advanced techniques and became one of the greatest masters in this world. But what if this guy learned the advanced techniques right from the start? Maybe he could anticipate the birth of the most powerful swordsman this world has ever seen by at least 30 years. And obviously, with that, he will benefit to the maximum while he is close to him. At this, he calls for the director and comments that in this world, he seems to be realizing that this thing called martial arts is very relevant. Considering that probably if they start any kind of business and have any success, they will need to know how to defend themselves. Director Kim says he's heard of that stuff before, but as far as he knows, martial arts are only taught to those who belong to a sect. So how are they going to learn? Our boy already notices that the man knows a little about the martial world. He's not completely lost. He explains that in this city, there are 7 famous sects. There are the Demon Slayers, the Blinding Sect. No way am I going to say the names of all 7. We'll never remember them. But it looks like I'm going to have to, because the Demon Slayer sect uses sword and blade techniques. There's the Buddhist temple, that fights kind of with those Karate Kid moves. There's the House sect, which are the smart ones, and the sect of the 7 mysteries. It seems 3 of these are demonic sects, and not much is known about them, other than the fact that they have proficiency with witchcraft. And obviously, they do a lot of illegal things. He asks which of these Kim seems to like the most. Gu replies that he likes, obviously, the Demon Slayer sect. A true master in a place like this has to use his sword and learn blade techniques. Kim is impressed. He didn't even need to convince this guy to follow the exact same path he took in his other life. Kim wants to know, however, how does he already know all this? Our boy says that when he was negotiating and getting the identities, he overheard some guys talking. And man, our first time skip happened. 3 months. In front of the sect, the guys ask what they're doing there. Our dear Seo there on the left and says he brought his older brother, who is interested in learning martial arts. The Rock in a Goku outfit doesn't seem very excited about it. However, he sees from their clothes that the guys must have a good amount of money and they're in need of it. Even so, he apologizes and says that learning martial arts at this age would be almost impossible. Our dear Seo insists, asking to at least see someone from the higher ranks, already slipping him a coin. A while later, already inside the sect, someone wants to know if they really just want to learn for self-defense. Our boy brought a feast of silver ingots and says yes, that's all they want. The moment the old guy sees the money, he says it's all right, they can be external disciples. However, they should know that there's no special treatment there for those who enter through donations. Besides, they would only accept one of the 2. Kim is about to complain about this, but right then our boy accepts, saying it's perfect for them. The guy is already leaving, saying, okay then, just come find him there and join the rest of the disciples. Kim asks our boy if it's okay for only him to be learning martial arts. He would have chosen a different group if he had known it would be this expensive. Our boy tells him not to worry, he was never very good at sports either. While he's going to handle the business for now, Kim will go there and learn a bit of those so-called martial arts. The old guy thanks him but says he doesn't know if he'll really be able to learn much. Our boy tells him to trust himself and try before judging. Another time skip. 7 months later, the competition within the sect. The man on the throne wants to know where this guy came from. Obvious, it's Mr. Kim who has crushed all the disciples who have been in this sect for years. Mastering a martial art means understanding its true meaning and aligning your body with it. Someone with low knowledge at best becomes a third-rate warrior. And to advance from that point on, you need more and more knowledge. The guys attack him, saying he's an outsider and will never beat them. Obviously, more knowledge means you've invested more time and also put in more effort. However, certain people had enough talent to laugh in the face of all this knowledge business. They had enough talent to advance through numerous stages at once. The Demon Slayer sect is already famous for having numerous members like that. But for the first time, an outsider appeared and killed all of those so-called great disciples. In just 7 months, Director Kim became a first-rate warrior who had mastered absolutely all the techniques of that place. The old guy bites himself. He doesn't understand how it's possible for someone to evolve so quickly. To force something like that, they would need to gather countless martial artists to support someone. Not to mention that this guy is an outsider who has never had any contact with martial arts. So how did this happen? It was as if the very tradition of that place had kneeled before this man. Whoa! And they gave the order to capture him. There's our boy. He already imagined that this could create a problem, an outsider dominating this place in 7 months, leaving everything in chaos. Because of this, the guys are accusing him of being a spy, but even imprisoned, the Slay Dog is practicing. What Seo doesn't understand is why he's also imprisoned. He knows nothing about martial arts, and now he's in there with the other guy. Our boy asks if the director isn't worried, man. A lot of people suspect he's a spy. Normally, in these kinds of stories, they'll destroy his martial arts, cut off an arm, or somehow prevent him from being able to fight. The director, however, replies that he already knows about that. But for some reason, he feels that continuing to practice is the only way to get past the next barrier. And inside, he already knew that upon passing this one, he would advance to the next stage. Seo knows how incredible that was. Being a first-class warrior was already impressive, but advancing beyond that is something only the masters of the sects can achieve. This was already a level where at most there are 1,000 men with this strength in this world. Not to mention that, after this, the only thing left is the peak, where you are basically untouchable. Right then, Seo is certain this guy is going to be at the top of the world, not 30 years earlier than he imagined, but about 40 years faster. 7 days later, there's manager Kim with little flowers flying around him, absorbing energy as Seo already knows that this is the key that only appears in martial artists nearing the peak. At this, Kim stands up, announcing that he has crossed the barrier and now he's no longer afraid of this sect's leader. Our boy praises him, says his talent exceeds what he expected. The old guy says he's also impressed with himself. He didn't imagine he had this kind of talent. Maybe it was because when he was a child, he read countless martial stories. Right at that moment, some guys rush in, announcing that the time has come. They had received orders from the leader to destroy his energy core. That's because they are now certain he's a damned member of the demonic sect. Kim gives them a look and our boy, tries to calm everyone down, saying he already confessed that no one there is a spy. The guy just tells him to shut up and punches him in the face, warning that he's already heard them talking in that coded language and is sure they are not honest people. However, at this, Kim has already drawn his sword and his hand is cut. The cut was so precise that he didn't sever the hand, but he disarmed the guy. And the bald guy warns that he's already made it clear this was his first sect. The Rock Goku comes to slash with his sword, but in a few seconds, everyone had received the same little tap on the hand and dropped their swords. Everyone is already running desperately down the corridors, saying that strangely he seemed to be at the peak of martial arts. At this, Kim calls for our boy and warns that he's going to other sects to train and wants to know what he's going to do. Our boy, not being a fool, says he's going to follow him. They could go, for example, to the unorthodox dragon sect. The old guy says he'll meet him there, and in the next scene, he's already at the top of the mountain. And damn, Kim's sword is already bathed in blood. He asks why it took Seo so long, and he laughs, saying that yeah, the director is a little faster than him. And noticing the state of the sword, he already knows that this guy was not a violent person at all, but this world has already changed him. It would be a dream if one day he could return to the peaceful life on Earth. If he could choose a return, it would be there. He's tired of the violence of this world. However, none of that matters, because now he's here and he'll do whatever is necessary to survive. After being betrayed by the first sect, they invaded the dragon's house and took over everything. 2 years later, they ventured into the Wanga region and continued to defeat numerous sects. And it was in the 3rd year that all the emblems of all the sects had been cut down by him. Before long in that region, he was named the strongest martial artist under the heavens, and he used this fame of his to unite the sects and form an alliance. Man, 7 years later, we're moving along here, huh? He and the director were as close as brothers, ignoring the age difference between them. They even managed to work on a specific martial art for our boy. Mr. Kim hands him the book and says the name of the technique is the Mountain Cutter. He had made this with our boy's talent in mind and is sure he can reach the peak. Seo seems impressed that technique was really above any other he had ever seen. The only problem is obviously the expected one. He had absolutely no talent. He was learning from the most powerful martial artists under the heavens, who created a martial art specifically for him and only him. And even so, he barely managed to become a third-rate warrior after a whole year of practicing. At this, he says that maybe there's no way. He has a talent for medicine, and apparently, that's the way to live life. Each person has talents in different areas. And with that, on the first day, after a decade had passed, he glimpsed the level he had only heard about in legends. The 5 energies of the world converting into a single person. The old guy has a fit and starts contorting. What's this? His hair grew long and turned black. Seo calls for the old guy, and suddenly the guy is handsome with long hair and muscular. This was the so-called skeletal reconstruction that creates a new body. Next chapter, our boy says that the guy, is looking younger than him, and Kim responds that he really does feel full of life, as if he could do anything. Our boy congratulates him, saying the world is going to be scared of this skeletal reconstruction. At this, Kim stands up and says he'll have to pass on the succession of the martial alliance to someone else soon. Our boy wants to know who he's thinking of, and the guy says that there are some talented people, but no one really understood the essence of martial arts. Seo comments, that he's the only one extraordinary enough to know what that really is. If he's expecting to find another genius like himself, it's going to be difficult. Kim, however, looking out the window, said that even when trying to lower his expectations, there was no one who was worthy. And we've jumped forward another 15 years. It's been 35 years since our boy began his life on the path of ascension, and now he's already 65 years old man. He's curious to know what Kim is doing. A year after the skeletal reconstruction, he passed on the position of leader to someone else and left. He wanted to be able to retire with that guy, but he had to stay in this place to take care of the strategic part of the alliance. Kim said he'd like to travel through this world much more. Maybe that's why he couldn't come to our boy's retirement ceremony. He's walking through the garden saying that this place is too silent and quiet. He bought this beautiful mansion with the money he got from his retirement. The only downside is that it was too big, and he was all alone. At this, there's someone there in the middle of the bushes, and when he takes a look, it was Kim. I'm still not used to him with long hair. Our boy wants to know where he's been and why he's only showing up now. However, he just falls back onto the grass and calls out for Seo, and he tells him that he really believed he was blessed in martial arts. Our boy says that of course he was. If he's not a genius, who would be? His friend replies that yes, in this world of common mortals, he really was not ordinary. The protagonist laughs, of course he wasn't ordinary. However, Kim then says that he fought against a true practitioner, One of those from 35 years ago, like that guy who flew and took their friends. Siva knows that these guys don't reveal themselves easily. They are like shadows that control the entire world from the darkness. And as the martial alliance they created gained more and more power, these guys started wanting to influence them. No one could stop these guys because opposing them was like opposing the nation itself. And that's why any rule given by them was obeyed. That's why Kim left this place. He wanted to fight against these guys as an individual and not as a master, especially since that could affect the alliance. Kim then says that they were extremely difficult to find, but he located one. Most ignored him, saying he wasn't worthy of a fight for being immortal. They all disappeared, used illusions, and none of them wanted to fight. However, 5 years ago, he finally got a duel. Siu asks if he won, and the guy says he won. The protagonist praises for not being the leader and doing this, otherwise they would have paid the price. Kim then says that he put his whole life on the line in the fight against this guy, and all he managed to do was a small cut on the tip of his finger. The truth is, the guy made a bet that if he made even the slightest cut, he would theoretically win, so that's kind of how he was considered the winner. Steele right then says this guy must have been one of the top 10 strongest, something like that. However, unfortunately, that wasn't the case, man. He was actually at the stage of one of the weakest. In comparison to mortal martial artists, this guy was basically like someone who just entered the second stage, extremely basic. Siu says that's impossible. He already knew that in his past life, these guys were ridiculously powerful creatures. However, he's sure that Kim is someone who has reached the pinnacle of humanity. He could deliver numerous cuts while seeming to float and was untouchable. This guy in front of him was a genius, so how did he only manage to cut the tip of a random cultivator's finger? And at this, Kim tells him that he has lived his whole life as a frog in a well. They don't stand a chance against these guys who are basically walking natural disasters. However, he has something to say. Even so, today he cut off one of their hands. Our excited boy asked if he managed to win, and he says no. The guy put a talisman on his hand, regenerated, and that was it. The problem is that now he realized he has reached the limit of martial arts, and today he's here to say goodbye to our boy. That's because when the guy saw his willpower and his training, he said he would accept him into the sect. He would no longer be a martial artist, but would instead begin the path of immortality. Seo says that's impossible. To become a cultivator means to abandon mortality. However, something like that can only be done if the person possesses a spiritual root. And Kim then explains that his skeletal transformation is basically him reaching the same level of talent that a cultivator is born with. Someone as brilliant as him needed to train his whole life to reach the minimum that these guys possess. He makes a cut in the void and says he's leaving. The crazy guy is literally entering another planet, saying he's going to leave one last gift for our boy. Before he can respond, he's left with the scroll and the guy has disappeared. The manuscript was a record of how to transcend and achieve cultivation through martial arts. Stu, however, wanted to know where his friend was going without him. And with that, time passed. Once again, there he is coughing, saying that this world is cruel. It's been 50 years since he arrived in this world. However, there he is again, dying from a random cold, just like in his past life. Destiny was something that it seemed a human, no matter how much they tried, could not escape. In the end, the only thing that changed was the house and the clothes, but he died on the exact same day. At this, he is sure he lived life to the fullest. He didn't want to have any regrets like in his past life, so he kept himself as busy as possible, studied as much as possible, practiced as much as possible, and never even bothered with marriage or normal things. It was because of this that he managed to unite all the martial sects in the region. He achieved fame, wealth, and everything the mortal world had to offer. So why now at this moment did he have a feeling of emptiness? Could it be that if he and Kim had tried even harder, they would have reached the heavens? Unfortunately, his body will not find that answer. All he could feel was a deep sense of powerlessness. Truly, it was another life of disappointments. This marked the end of the second regression and the arrival of a like on this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers. Activate the cheeky little bell and mount. Last note, I'm excited to see what else this series has to offer, man. He's going to live several different lives, enjoying different things, and what the conclusions will be. What will he learn in each one of them? Interesting. So there's potential here. I don't know about you, but I see this potential, you know. That's it, Saya.